Okay, so I'm working with Katie on the middle out section of the project, and what I'm particularly bringing to it is an interest in property. So I'm a lawyer. I'm essentially a property lawyer, which I've worked in for a long time, and I'm much more recently come into the whole idea of energy and property use and so on. So what we're interested in the middle out analysis is mapping and understanding how different property ownership structures influence and affect energy management and the challenges that that brings. Which button do I press to move things? There we go. So we have this not a very great picture for the purpose, but we have obviously in the retail sector lots of different properties, and you're very familiar with the idea that they come in different shapes and sizes. Some are refurbed, some are not refurbed, some are new builds, some are very old, and so on. What I'm interested in is when Pete and co sprinkle their fairy dust on the energy data and try and match that energy data to property ownership and property structures, what then can we see? Can we see new things that perhaps people haven't seen before? So that's bringing together sort of top-level science to an understanding of how property works. And the particular interest we have is there was in one of the earlier slides, is the difference between ownership and rental property. And we're interested in drilling down into some specifics about rental property. So, for example, one of the organisations that we're working with, M&G, have told us that they're going to supply us with information about their property portfolio that will have technical specifications in relation to the property. So that will include the age, the size, the physical composition, EPC ratings. They'll also provide us with information about leases, lease lengths, when the break clauses occur, and so on, and whether they've signed up to memorandum of understanding in relation to environmental issues, and access to talk to people who are dealing with the facilities management and management of energy in relation to the common parts. And so by having that detailed information about a company, a landlord's property portfolio, I'm hoping that when Pete sprinkles his scientific fairy dust onto the energy data, we'll find some really interesting things that might be very useful to help us to understand energy strategies. My own particular interest is much more on landlord and tenant issues, and I've done quite a lot of work in the last 7 or 8 years trying to understand what the challenges are when you've got rental property in relation to environmental issues and energy issues. And I think people are fairly well aware of what the challenges are. So we talk a lot about what we call the split incentive, which is where the landlord pays for the cost of improvements to the property, the upgrades to the property, but it's the tenant who's paying the energy bill. So this creates the problem of split incentives. We're aware of the fact that leases tend to ignore environmental sustainability issues. There are really big problems of fit out and churn and the waste that comes with that, but also with fit out affecting energy usage and having an impact on the EPC ratings. So we're well aware of what the problems are, and what we're hoping to do is to begin to investigate what works to enable landlords and tenants to work better together. And there's quite a need for this to be happening at the moment. So increasingly, the language of the CRC began this, 4 or 5 years ago. Then we've now got a lot of conversation happening around the minimum energy performance regulations and what will that mean for the commercial sector. Service charge caps that exist, cost of energy, the need for data sharing. All of these things mean that landlords are having to engage with tenants. And the problem is that how do you do that in an environment which has traditionally been quite adversarial and quite distant? So what we really want to do as this part of the project is to find out what the experience is between landlords and tenants, to find out what works, what doesn't work, what's been tried, what hasn't been tried. So my particular interest has come at this from someone who's very interested in the terms of leases, so looking particularly at green leases and the use of memorandum of understanding. We know that some landlords use green leases and find them an enabler of at least being able to have conversations about cooperation, sharing and so on. And some landlords we know think that green leases are a waste of time and are not interested in doing green leases. We're interested in knowing why they've gone down these routes. Similarly with retailer, the retail tenants, probably the best known is the Marks and Spencer's programme of green leases, which they announced about 18 months ago now, where they said that all new leases they'd enter into would be green leases, and they have a rolling programme of introducing memorandum of understanding to deal with properties that are already let, the existing leases. And yet, on the other hand, we know a lot of retailers will have nothing to do with green leases. So again, we're interested in exploring that, and the retail sector is being one in which it's been particularly hard to begin this process of engagement between landlords and tenants. So you speak to landlords and they say, well, it's much easier, it's not easy, but it's easier addressing the problem in relation to office property than it is for retail property. So this is a space in which we hope that we'll be able to provide some insight as to what the experience has been, as to what works. And I did a little bit of research about a year ago where I looked at the content of agreed leases. So this was based on information at the land registry. There's a very small sample of leases, and I only looked at BREEAM rated buildings because I took the view that if any leases were going to have green in, there would probably be the BREEAM rated buildings. So on the basis of this very small sample, I found that 2/3 of leases had some green in, but when you actually drill down to what that means, it means quite different things in different leases. Around half of the leases had some data sharing provision, but we know in the conversations we've already begun to have with landlords that that isn't necessarily effective. So we've heard from landlords who say that actually they've got a number of leases with data sharing provisions in, but the tenants still aren't sharing the data. So we're really interested in following up what some of these provisions are delivering, how you make green leases effective, how you make green MOUs effective. So we're really keen to talk to landlords, tenants, property owners in relation to this stage of the property who will be happy to give us information about their legal infrastructure, but also to be able to talk to energy managers and understand how these problems are being addressed on the ground, in the shops, in the shopping centres and so on.